Janitor becomes a millionaire. Her genius twin sons create a revolutionary wheelchair. Before we begin, let's create a wave of positivity. Comment one word that describes how you're feeling today. The alarm clock rang at 4 in the morning, just like every day for the past 3 years. Sarah Mitchell, Sarah, at 27 years old, already knew every sound in that rented house in Detroit. The neighbor leaving for work, the rumble of the old heater, and especially the silence of her children still sleeping. She got up slowly, trying not to make noise. In the small kitchen, she prepared 2 peanut butter sandwiches, one for each twin. Ethan and Noah, her 7-year-old boys, had been her entire world since David left her 2 years ago, taking all their savings and leaving behind only debts. "It has to be today," she whispered to herself, looking at the red electricity bill stuck to the refrigerator. "It has to be today." Sarah worked cleaning offices downtown. She started at 5 in the morning and finished at 2 in the afternoon, rushing to pick up the boys from school at 3. It was a constant race against time and money that never seemed enough. Ethan and Noah were different from other kids. While their classmates played video games, they took apart old radios and televisions they found in dumpsters. Sarah often found them in their shared bedroom, surrounded by wires and electronic components, whispering about circuits and batteries. "Mum, look what we made!" Noah had shown her the previous week, holding a small device that made their broken flashlight work again. "That's wonderful, honey," she had replied, not fully understanding but seeing the sparkle in their eyes. That morning, as Sarah grabbed her cleaning supplies, she heard whispers coming from the boys' room. They were supposed to be sleeping, but she could see light under their door. "Boys, you need to sleep. School starts in 3 hours. Just 5 more minutes." "Mom," Ethan called out, "we're almost done with something really important." Sarah sighed. She was already running late, and Mrs. Henderson, her supervisor at the cleaning company, had already warned her about tardiness. But something in her sons' voices made her pause. There was excitement there, different from their usual projects. She opened the door slightly and saw them hunched over something in the corner. Scattered around them were wheels from old toy cars, batteries from remote controls, and what looked like parts from a broken office chair she had brought home weeks ago. "What are you two up to now?" she asked, stepping into the room. The boys looked up with guilty expressions, but their eyes were shining with excitement. "We can't tell you yet," Noah said, trying to hide something behind his back. "But it's going to help someone, really help someone." Sarah felt her heart skip. Her boys always surprised her with their kindness, but lately they seemed to be working on something bigger than their usual projects. "All right, but promise me you'll go to sleep after I leave. And remember, no playing with electricity while I'm gone." "We promise, Mom," they said in unison, but she caught them exchanging a look that told her they had something planned. As Sarah walked to her car in the pre-dawn darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that this day would be different somehow. Little did she know that her 7-year-old sons were about to change not just their lives, but the lives of countless others around the world. The morning air was cold, and her breath formed small clouds as she started the old sedan. 3 more payments, she thought, and the car would finally be hers. 3 more payments, and maybe she could start saving for something better for the boys. But fate had other plans waiting just hours away. At Riverside Elementary School, Mrs. Jennifer Hayes had been teaching 2nd grade for 15 years, but she had never encountered children quite like Ethan and Noah Mitchell. While other 7-year-olds struggled with basic addition, the twins were asking questions about electricity and mechanics that would challenge high school students. "Boys, please pay attention to the lesson," she said gently, as she noticed them whispering and drawing diagrams in their notebook margins. But what Mrs. Hayes didn't know was that the twins weren't being disruptive. They were solving a problem that had been keeping them awake for weeks. It had started 3 months earlier when they met Mr. Franklin, an elderly man in a wheelchair who lived in their apartment building. Every day they watched him struggle to navigate the narrow hallways alone, unable to have visitors because there wasn't room for 2 wheelchairs side by side. His wife died last year, Noah had whispered to Ethan one afternoon. "Mum told me she used to push his wheelchair everywhere. Now he's always alone." That night, the boys had started sketching. What if there was a wheelchair that could seat two people? What if someone who couldn't walk could still travel with a companion, a grandchild, a friend? During recess, while other children played on the swings, Ethan and Noah sat under their favorite oak tree, refining their designs. "The motor needs to be stronger," Ethan said, erasing something on their paper. "Two people weigh more than one." "And the battery," Noah added, pushing his glasses up his nose, a habit he'd inherited from their father, though Sarah tried not to think about that. "It needs to last longer for longer trips." Their teacher, Mrs. Hayes, approached them with curiosity. She had called Sarah several times in the past months, not to complain, but to express amazement at the boys' abilities. "What are you two working on today?" she asked, sitting beside them on the grass. The twins looked at each other, having that silent conversation that only twins can have. "We're trying to help someone," Noah said finally. "Someone who's lonely," Ethan added. Mrs. Hayes looked at their notebook and gasped. The drawings were incredibly detailed for 7-year-olds. There were measurements, notes about materials, even rough calculations for power consumption. "Boys, where did you learn to draw like this?" "We just know," Ethan shrugged. "When we see a problem, we can see the solution too, like puzzle pieces fitting together in our heads." Mrs. Hayes had seen gifted children before, but this was different. This wasn't just intelligence. It was innovation combined with compassion, a rare combination at any age. "Have you shown this to your mother?" "Not yet," Noah said. "We want to build it first, to show her it really works. But we don't have money for the parts," Ethan added sadly. Mrs. Hayes felt something stirring in her heart. These children weren't just playing. They were trying to solve a real problem for a real person. She thought about her own grandmother, who had spent her last years isolated because traveling in her wheelchair was so difficult. "Boys, what if I told you there might be a way to get the parts you need?" Their eyes widened simultaneously. "Really?" Noah whispered. Mrs. Hayes nodded. She was thinking about the school's annual innovation fair, where local businesses often sponsored student projects. But more than that, she was thinking about her brother Michael, who worked as an engineer at Ford Motor Company. "I might know someone who could help, but first, I need to call your mother." That afternoon, when Sarah arrived to pick up the boys, Mrs. Hayes was waiting with an expression that made Sarah's stomach tighten. Had they gotten in trouble? Were they falling behind in their studies? "Mrs. Mitchell, could I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah's heart raced as she followed the teacher to a quiet corner, watching Ethan and Noah play on the playground. "Is everything okay? Are the boys causing problems?" Mrs. Hayes smiled. "Quite the opposite. Sarah, I need you to sit down for what I'm about to tell you." The next 10 minutes would change Sarah's understanding of her sons forever. As Mrs. Hayes explained their project, showed her the drawings, and described their motivation, Sarah felt tears building in her eyes. "They want to help Mr. Franklin," she whispered. "It's more than that, Sarah. They've essentially designed a revolutionary mobility device. I've never seen anything like this from children their age." Sarah looked at her sons, playing innocently on the swings, and realized she had been so focused on surviving day to day that she had missed seeing the extraordinary minds growing right in front of her. "What happens now?" she asked. Mrs. Hayes leaned forward with excitement. "Now, we helped them build it." That evening, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table, staring at the drawings her sons had spread out before her. The sketches were more sophisticated than anything she could have imagined from 7-year-olds, but what struck her most was the note written in Noah's careful handwriting at the bottom of the page, "For Mr. Franklin and everyone who feels alone." "Mom, are you crying?" Ethan asked, climbing onto her lap. "Happy tears, baby," she whispered, holding him close. "These are very happy tears." Noah joined them, and for a moment the three of them sat in their tiny kitchen, surrounded by dreams drawn on notebook paper. "Mrs. Hayes says her brother might help us," Noah said. "He builds cars." And she thinks we might win money at the school fair, Ethan added. Sarah's practical mind kicked in. Money from a school fair wouldn't be enough for what they were planning. The motors alone would cost hundreds of dollars, money she didn't have and couldn't borrow. Boys, I love what you're doing. But building something like this costs a lot of money, more money than we have right now. She watched their faces fall and felt her heart break. How do you explain financial limitations to children who see solutions to problems everywhere they look? What if we started smaller? Noah suggested. What if we built just part of it first? Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock at their door. It was unusual. They rarely had visitors, and it was nearly 8 o'clock. Sarah opened the door to find a man in his 40s, wearing a Ford jacket and holding the notebook the boys had left with Mrs. Hayes. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Michael Hayes, Jennifer's brother. I hope I'm not coming too late, but after she showed me these drawings, I had to meet the boys who created them. Sarah invited him in, and within minutes, Ethan and Noah were explaining their design to someone who actually understood their technical language. The dual motor system is brilliant, Michael said, studying their sketches. And this battery configuration, boys, do you understand what you've designed here? A wheelchair for 2 people, Noah said uncertainly. No, Michael said, his voice filled with excitement. You've designed something that could change mobility forever. This isn't just a wheelchair. It's a social mobility device. People who use wheelchairs could travel with companions. Grandparents could take grandchildren on adventures. Couples could explore together. He looked at Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell, I work with engineers who have been in the field for 20 years and haven't come up with something this innovative. Sarah felt dizzy. What are you saying? I'm saying your boys might have just invented the next revolution in mobility assistance, and I'm saying Ford Motor Company would like to help them build a prototype. The room went silent except for the ticking of their old wall clock. Ford? Sarah whispered. Ford, Michael confirmed. We have a community innovation program. We provide materials and workshop space for projects that could benefit people with disabilities. Your boys' design qualifies. Ethan and Noah looked at each other, then at their mother, then back at Michael. Does this mean we can help Mr. Franklin? Noah asked. This means you might help thousands of people like Mr. Franklin, Michael replied. That night, after Michael left with promises to call tomorrow with details, Sarah tucked her boys into bed with hands that were still shaking. Mom, are we really going to build our chair? Ethan asked sleepily. I think so. Baby, I think we really are. But as she turned off their light and walked to her own room, Sarah couldn't shake a growing worry. What if this was too good to be true? What if her boys' dreams were bigger than what the world would allow 2 7-year-olds to accomplish? She had learned not to trust promises after David left. She had learned that dreams often led to disappointment. But looking at the pure hope in her son's eyes, she decided that maybe, just maybe, it was time to believe in something extraordinary again. Little did she know that across town, Michael Hayes was making phone calls that would set events in motion far beyond anything any of them could imagine. 3 days later, Sarah found herself standing in a massive Ford workshop, watching her 7-year-old sons explain their design to a room full of engineers. The past 72 hours had felt like a dream she was afraid to wake up from. Michael had called the morning after his visit, followed by calls from Ford's community outreach coordinator, then the head of their innovation department. Within 48 hours, they had scheduled this meeting. The battery array goes here, Noah was saying, pointing to their hand-drawn diagrams now displayed on a large screen. And the charging port would be here, so people can charge it overnight like a phone. The engineers were taking notes furiously. Sarah watched their faces, seeing expressions of amazement and respect that grown men rarely showed to children. Noah, what made you think of dual motors instead of one larger motor? Asked Dr. Patricia Williams, Ford's head of mobility innovation. Balance, Noah replied simply. One motor might make it tip. 2 motors, one for each side, means it stays steady even on hills. Dr. Williams looked at Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell, have your boys had any formal engineering training? Sarah almost laughed. They take apart everything they can find and watch YouTube videos about how things work. That's about it. Remarkable, Dr. Williams murmured, turning back to the boys. Ethan, tell me about your safety features. Ethan stepped forward, suddenly confident in a way Sarah had never seen before. Seat belts for both people, of course, but also sensors that slow down automatically if something gets too close, and emergency brakes that both people can reach. And lights, Noah added. Bright lights for nighttime and turn signals like cars have. Michael Hayes leaned over to Sarah. In my 15 years at Ford, I've never seen anything like this. They're not just smart, they understand user experience, safety protocols, manufacturing constraints. It's like they have an intuitive grasp of engineering principles that usually take years to learn. Dr. Williams was now sketching modifications on a whiteboard, discussing load calculations and battery life with the twins as if they were graduate students. Boys, we'd like to offer you something, she said finally. Ford would like to fund the development of your prototype, full funding, materials, workshop time, engineering support. Sarah felt her knees go weak. What does that mean exactly? It means we build their design, Michael explained. Full scale, working prototype. If it works as well as we think it will, Ford would be interested in licensing the design. Licensing? Sarah asked. Sarah? Dr. Williams smiled. It means Ford would pay your family for the right to manufacture and sell their invention, potentially a substantial amount. The room spun slightly. Sarah gripped the edge of the table. How substantial? She managed to ask. If this device performs as projected, and if it captures even a small percentage of the mobility market, we're talking about 7 figures, Dr. Williams said quietly. Possibly 8. Sarah's vision blurred. 7 figures meant millions. 8 figures meant tens of millions. Mom, are you okay? Ethan asked, noticing her pale face. I'm fine, baby, she whispered, but she wasn't fine. She was terrified. This was too big, too incredible, too far beyond anything she had ever imagined for their small life. There's one condition, Dr. Williams continued. The boys would need to be involved throughout the development process. This is their vision, and we want to make sure we build it right. It would mean regular visits here, testing sessions, design meetings. Can we do that, Mom? Noah asked eagerly. Sarah looked at her sons, seeing excitement and hope in their eyes that she hadn't seen since before their father left. How could she say no to their dreams? But how could she say yes to something so overwhelming? We'll need to discuss this as a family, she said finally. Of course, Dr. Williams nodded. Take all the time you need. But Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to understand something. Your boys have created something genuinely revolutionary. This could change lives on a scale we're only beginning to comprehend. As they drove home in Sarah's old sedan, the boys chattered excitedly in the back seat about motors and batteries and all the people they could help. But Sarah's mind was racing with worry. What if this was too good to be true? What if something went wrong? What if her boy's innocence was somehow taken advantage of? And perhaps most frighteningly, what if it all worked exactly as promised, and their simple life was changed forever? That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life, or if she was finally about to give her sons the future they deserved. Tomorrow, she would have to decide. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor that would help Sarah make her decision. As she was preparing breakfast, someone knocked softly on their door. She opened it to find Mr. Franklin, the elderly man from their building, sitting in his wheelchair with tears in his eyes. Mrs. Mitchell, he said in his gentle voice, I hope I'm not intruding. Mrs. Hayes from the school called me yesterday. She told me about what your boys are trying to do. Sarah's heart clenched. In all the excitement about Ford and prototypes and licensing deals, she had almost forgotten that this had all started with her sons wanting to help this lonely man. Mr. Franklin, please come in, she said, holding the door wide. Ethan and Noah rushed from the kitchen when they heard his voice. Mr. Franklin, Noah exclaimed, we're going to build your chair. With 2 seats, Ethan added, so you won't have to be alone anymore. The elderly man's eyes filled with tears again. "Boys, do you know what you've done for me? Just knowing that someone cares enough to try to solve my loneliness. It's given me hope I haven't felt in 2 years." He looked at Sarah. "My wife Eleanor died 26 months ago. We were married for 47 years, and suddenly I was navigating the world alone. The isolation, Mrs. Mitchell, it's crushing. I stopped going places because being the only person in a wheelchair, surrounded by couples and families, made the loneliness worse." Sarah sat down beside him, understanding flooding through her. She knew about loneliness, about feeling isolated and different from everyone around you. "Your boys," Mr. Franklin continued, "they didn't just see my wheelchair, they saw my heart. They understood that the real disability isn't my legs, it's being cut off from human connection." Noah climbed onto Sarah's lap. "That's why we want to build it, Mom, so people don't have to be alone." "But it's more than that now," Ethan said seriously. "Mrs. Hayes's brother said we could help thousands of people." "Thousands, Mom." Mr. Franklin nodded. "I've been thinking about this all night. How many grandparents could take their grandchildren on adventures? How many couples where one person needs a wheelchair could travel together? How many friendships could be maintained if mobility wasn't a barrier to shared experiences?" Sarah felt something shifting in her chest. This wasn't just about money or success. This was about her son's fundamental understanding of human connection and their desire to fix what was broken in the world. "Mr. Franklin," she said slowly, "are you saying you think we should do this?" "I'm saying your boys have a gift that goes beyond intelligence. They have empathy that leads to innovation. That's rarer than genius, Mrs. Mitchell." That afternoon, Sarah called Dr. Williams. "We'd like to move forward," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Wonderful! We can start next week with initial prototype development." "There's one condition from our end," Sarah added, surprising herself. "Mr. Franklin, the man who inspired this design, needs to be involved in testing and feedback. This is for people like him, and his input needs to guide the development." "Absolutely," Dr. Williams agreed immediately. "User input is crucial for any assistive device. Can you bring him to our first design session on Monday?" That weekend, Sarah, Ethan, Noah, and Mr. Franklin spent hours talking about what the perfect mobility device would look like from a user's perspective. Mr. Franklin shared stories about places he'd wanted to go with Eleanor, but couldn't because of mobility challenges. The boys took notes and made adjustments to their designs. "What about storage?" Mr. Franklin asked. "Sometimes you need to carry things, groceries, gifts for grandchildren, medical supplies." "Hidden compartments," Noah said excitedly, "like secret places built into the chair." "And cup holders," Ethan added, "for both seats." Sarah watched this collaboration between a 73-year-old man and two 7-year-old boys, seeing something beautiful emerge. This wasn't just about building a device. It was about building understanding between generations, creating connections where isolation had existed. Monday morning, as they prepared to go to Ford for their first official development meeting, Sarah felt a calm she hadn't experienced in years. They were doing something important, something bigger than their small struggles and daily worries. "Mom," Noah said as they got in the car, "are you scared?" "A little," Sarah admitted, "but I'm more excited than scared. You boys are going to change the world. We're going to change it together," Ethan corrected. "All of us." As they drove toward the Ford facility, with Mr. Franklin following in his adapted van, Sarah realized her sons had already changed her world. They had taught her to see beyond survival, beyond just getting through each day, to imagine what was possible when intelligence combined with compassion. The prototype development was about to begin, but the real transformation had already started in her heart. 6 weeks into the prototype development, Sarah barely recognized her life. The boys were spending 3 afternoons a week at Ford, working with engineers who treated them like colleagues. Mr. Franklin had become an honorary grandfather to Ethan and Noah, and their tiny apartment had become an unofficial testing ground for mobility concepts. But it was the phone call on a Tuesday morning that changed everything completely. Mrs. Mitchell, this is David Carlson from Automotive Weekly magazine. We'd like to do a feature story on your sons and their revolutionary wheelchair design. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the phone. How did you find out about this? Ford issued a press release yesterday about their community innovation program. Your boy's project was highlighted as a breakthrough in assistive technology. After she hung up, Sarah's phone didn't stop ringing. CNN, NBC, The Today Show, Good Morning America. Everyone wanted to interview the 7-year-old twins who had designed the future of mobility. "Mom, why are all these people calling?" Noah asked as Sarah's phone rang for the 10th time that morning. Before she could answer, Dr. Williams called with news that made her sit down hard. "Sarah, we've had inquiries from 12 different countries about licensing rights to the boy's design. The prototype isn't even finished, and we're looking at international interest." "What does that mean for us?" Sarah asked weakly. "It means the licensing deal we discussed is going to be significantly larger than our initial projections. Sarah, we're now talking about a deal that could be worth $50 million in the first 5 years alone." Sarah's phone slipped from her hand. $50 million. The number was so large it didn't seem real. That evening, as she tucked the boys into bed, they were buzzing with excitement about their day at Ford. "Mum, Dr. Williams says our chair can go 25 miles on one charge," Ethan reported. "And it has a built-in phone charger and GPS," Noah added. "And the best part," they said together, "Mr. Franklin got to test it today." "How did he like it?" Sarah asked, her heart full. "He cried happy tears," Noah said. "Just like you do." "He said he felt free for the first time in 2 years," Ethan added. "He said when he sat in the companion seat with Dr. Williams driving, he remembered what it felt like to explore with someone he cared about." Sarah felt her own happy tears starting. This was what mattered, not the money or the media attention, but the moment when their invention gave someone back a piece of their life they thought was lost forever. "Boys, things are going to change for us," she said carefully. "People want to interview you, and Ford thinks your invention is going to make us a lot of money." "How much money?" Noah asked practically. "Enough that I won't have to work 3 jobs anymore. Enough that we can move to a bigger place. Enough that you can go to any college you want someday." The boys considered this seriously. "Will we still be able to help people?" Ethan asked. "Even more people than before," Sarah promised. "Will Mr. Franklin still be our friend?" Noah wanted to know. "Always," Sarah assured him. "Then it sounds good," they decided. But as Sarah turned off their light and walked to her own room, she felt the weight of everything that was about to happen. Tomorrow the first media interviews would begin. Next week, Ford would unveil the prototype publicly. Within a month, their quiet life would be completely transformed. She looked at the red bills still stuck to her refrigerator and tried to imagine a world where money wasn't a constant worry. She tried to picture herself as someone other than Sarah, the cleaning lady. Sarah, who was always behind on rent. Sarah, who cut coupons and shopped at thrift stores. Who would she become when she was Sarah the millionaire? Sarah, whose sons had changed the world. The only thing she knew for certain was that tomorrow their real adventure would begin. And for the first time in 3 years, she was more excited than afraid of what the future might hold. Outside their window, Detroit glittered with possibilities that had never seemed within reach before. But now, with 2 extraordinary boys and 1 revolutionary idea, everything had changed. 2 months after the media explosion, Sarah stood in the living room of a house she actually owned, in Bloomfield Hills, watching movers carry in furniture that cost more than she used to make in a year. The Ford licensing deal had been finalized at $68 million over 7 years, with the first payment of $12 million already in their bank account. But success, Sarah was learning, came with complications she had never anticipated. "Mrs. Mitchell, Channel 7 News is here for the follow-up interview," said Janet, the publicist Ford had insisted they hire. "And don't forget, you have the patent attorney meeting at 3, then the financial advisor at 4. Sarah's head spun. 3 months ago, her biggest decision was whether to buy name brand or generic cereal. Now she was making choices about investments, trusts, and educational opportunities that would affect the rest of their lives. "Mom," Noah called from upstairs, "Ethan won't let me use the computer." "We're supposed to be working on the Mark II design," Ethan shouted back. "Dr. Williams is expecting our improvements by Friday." The boys had adapted to their new life with the resilience of children, but even they were feeling the pressure. Ford wanted them to continue innovating, developing improvements and new products. Schools across the country were inviting them to speak. Toy companies wanted to license their names. Sarah climbed the stairs to their new bedrooms, separate rooms now, each larger than their entire old apartment. She found them in Ethan's room, which had been converted into a mini laboratory with Ford's help. "What's the problem, boys?" "Noah wants to add a music system to the chair," Ethan said in exasperation. "But that's not important. We need to focus on making it lighter and faster." "Music is important," Noah protested. "Mr. Franklin said sometimes he gets sad during long rides. Music would help." Sarah sat on the bed, watching her sons navigate their first real disagreement about their work. Before, they had been united in wanting to help Mr. Franklin. Now, with the pressure of commercial success, they were developing different visions. "Boys, you're both right," she said carefully. "Maybe the Mark II can have different models, one focused on performance, one focused on comfort and entertainment." Their faces brightened. They hadn't considered making multiple versions. "Like car companies do," Noah said excitedly. "A whole product line," Ethan agreed. As they began sketching new ideas, Sarah felt her phone buzz with yet another interview request. The boys had become minor celebrities, featured on magazine covers and invited to technology conferences. Everyone wanted to know what other innovations the Miracle Twins were working on, but Sarah was starting to worry about the pressure. Ethan had developed a nervous habit of checking and rechecking his calculations, afraid of making mistakes now that millions of people were watching. Noah had started having nightmares about disappointing people who were counting on their inventions. "Mom," Ethan said quietly, "do you think we're smart enough to keep doing this?" The question broke Sarah's heart. 3 months ago, her boys had been confident in their abilities, driven by pure desire to help. Now, they were questioning themselves because the world was expecting miracles from 7-year-olds. "You are the smartest, most creative, most caring boys I know," she said firmly. "But more importantly, you don't have to carry the whole world on your shoulders. You're still children, and you're allowed to just be children sometimes." "But what if we can't think of anything else good?" Noah whispered. "Then we'll be grateful for the amazing thing you already created," Sarah replied. "And we'll live our lives knowing you made thousands of people happier and less lonely." That evening, as Sarah tucked them into their new beds in their new house, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would set boundaries. Interview requests would be limited. Work sessions would have scheduled breaks. Her sons needed protection from the very success they had created. But as she walked down the hallway of their beautiful new home, passing family photos in expensive frames and looking out windows at manicured gardens, Sarah couldn't shake a growing unease. Everything was perfect, too perfect, and in her experience, when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. She didn't know that across town, David Mitchell, the man who had abandoned them 3 years ago, was reading about his son's success in Forbes magazine and making plans of his own. The knock on the door came on a Saturday morning, interrupting the first peaceful breakfast they'd had in weeks. Sarah had declared it a no-work day. No interviews, no engineering sessions, just pancakes and cartoons like a normal family. She opened the door expecting a delivery, but instead found herself face to face with David Mitchell, her ex-husband, holding flowers and wearing his most charming smile. "Hello, Sarah. You look wonderful. Success suits you." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see my sons," David said, trying to look past her into the house. "I've been reading about their incredible achievements. I'm so proud of them." "Your sons?" Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. Your sons whose diapers you never changed, whose homework you never helped with, whose tears you never wiped when you walked out on us. Daddy! Sarah turned to see Ethan and Noah standing in the hallway, syrup still on their faces, staring at the man who had been absent from their lives for over 2 years. David's face lit up. Boys, look how much you've grown. I've been following your story in the news. I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. Noah stepped closer to Sarah. Why are you here? I came to congratulate you. And to be part of your lives again. I know I made mistakes, but seeing what extraordinary young men you've become, I realize what I've been missing. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. Made mistakes? You emptied our bank account and disappeared while I was pregnant. You left your 5-year-old sons asking every day when Daddy was coming home. I was young and scared, David said, his voice taking on the persuasive tone Sarah remembered too well. But I've grown up, Sarah. I've been getting my life together, and when I saw the boys' success, I realized this was my chance to make things right. Our success, Ethan said quietly, stepping protectively in front of his mother. We did this with Mom. You weren't here. David's expression flickered for just a moment before the charm returned. Of course, Ethan. Your mother is amazing. But boys, I'm your father. We're family, and families should share in each other's success. The word share made Sarah's stomach clench, of course. This wasn't about reconnecting with his sons. This was about the money. The boys have lawyers now, Sarah said coldly. If you want to discuss custody or visitation, you can contact them. Sarah, don't be like this, David said, his voice turning slightly harder. I have parental rights. These are my sons, and I have every right to be involved in decisions about their future. Mom, Noah whispered, tugging on her shirt. I don't want him to be involved in our decisions. David's mask slipped completely for a moment, revealing something calculating and cold. Noah, son, you're too young to understand. There are legal considerations here, financial responsibilities. Your mother might think she can keep me away, but the law says differently. Sarah felt her world tilting. She had been so focused on protecting the boys from the pressures of success that she hadn't considered this threat. David had legal parental rights, even though he had abandoned them, and now that there was money involved, I think you should leave, she said, trying to keep her voice steady for the boys' sake. I'll go for now, David said, his charming smile returning but not reaching his eyes. But I'll be back, Sarah. These are my sons, and they've just become very successful. I plan to be a part of that. After he left, Sarah deadbolted the door and sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Mom, we don't want him here, Ethan said firmly. He doesn't get to come back just because we made something good. I know, baby, I know. But as Sarah held her sons, she realized their beautiful new life had just become complicated in a way she had never anticipated. David was right about one thing. He did have parental rights, and with $68 million at stake, he wasn't going to give up easily. That afternoon, while the boys worked on designs in their room, Sarah made 3 phone calls to their lawyer, to a family law specialist, and to a private security company. Success, she was learning, required protection from people who wanted to take what didn't belong to them, even when those people were supposed to love her children. Especially when those people were supposed to love her children. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, but David didn't wait for legal proceedings to make his presence felt. He began showing up everywhere, at the boys' school, at Ford headquarters during their work sessions, at the grocery store where Sarah shopped. He's following us, Noah said nervously as they spotted David's car in the parking lot outside their favorite restaurant. He can't do that, can he? Ethan asked, pressing closer to Sarah's side. Sarah's lawyer, Margaret Chen, had explained the complicated reality. David had parental rights, but his abandonment and the boys' expressed wishes would weigh heavily in court. The problem was that family court moved slowly, and David was becoming increasingly aggressive about inserting himself into their lives. Mrs. Mitchell, Dr. Williams called with concern in her voice. Your ex-husband was here again today, demanding to be included in the boys' design sessions. He's claiming parental authority over their work. He can't do that, Sarah said. But her voice lacked conviction. David had always been persuasive, and he had hired an expensive lawyer with money he claimed to have inherited from a relative. The real blow came when Sarah arrived at Ford the next day to find David sitting in their usual conference room, chatting with engineers as if he belonged there. "Sarah," he called out cheerfully, "I was just telling the team about some ideas I have for marketing the boys' invention internationally." "You have no right to be here," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "Actually," said a man in an expensive suit standing beside David, "I'm Robert Hayes, Mr. Mitchell's attorney. My client has every right to be involved in decisions affecting his minor children's commercial interests." Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, legally, we may need to include him in future meetings until the custody situation is resolved." Sarah felt the room spinning. Everything they had built, everything the boys had created, through their own genius and compassion, was being invaded by the man who had abandoned them. "Boys, we're leaving," she said quietly. "But, Mom, we were going to test the new battery system today," Noah protested. "Not today," Sarah said firmly, taking their hands and leading them from the room. As they walked to the car, Ethan looked up at her with worried eyes. "Mom, is he going to take our invention away?" The question Sarah had been dreading. "No, baby, he can't take away what you created, but he might try to make decisions about it." "We don't want him making decisions," Noah said firmly. "He doesn't understand our invention. He doesn't know Mr. Franklin or why we built it." That evening, Margaret Chen called with an update that made Sarah's heart sink. "David is filing for joint custody and requesting shared control over the boys' commercial interests. He's arguing that as their father, he should have equal say in contracts and licensing deals. But he abandoned them," Sarah said desperately. "I know, but Sarah, family courts prioritize keeping fathers involved when possible. And with this much money at stake, the judge is going to want to ensure both parents are protecting the children's interests." After hanging up, Sarah sat in their beautiful kitchen, surrounded by all the material success her sons had earned, feeling more trapped than she had in their tiny apartment. "Mom," Noah appeared in the doorway in his pajamas. "I heard you crying." "I'm okay, honey." "No, you're not," Ethan said, joining his brother. "You're scared of him. We're scared of him too." Sarah pulled them close. "Boys, no matter what happens in court, I want you to remember something. You created something beautiful because you wanted to help people. That goodness, that caring heart. No one can take that away from you. Not your father, not any judge, not anyone." "But what if he makes us do things we don't want to do?" Noah asked. Sarah had been wondering the same thing. What if David pushed them to develop products they weren't interested in? What if he prioritized profit over their values? What if their pure motivation to help people got lost in legal battles and custody arrangements? "Then we'll fight," she said quietly. "We'll fight to protect what matters most." But as she tucked them into bed that night, Sarah wondered if love and good intentions would be enough to protect her sons from a father who saw them as lottery tickets rather than children. The custody hearing was still 2 weeks away, but Sarah could feel their perfect life beginning to crumble around the edges. And the worst part was knowing that David would use the boys' own success as a weapon against them. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Mr. Franklin. 3 days before the custody hearing, the elderly man called Sarah with excitement in his voice she hadn't heard since the early days of the wheelchair project. "Sarah, dear, I need to tell you something important. I've been doing some research about your ex-husband. Mr. Franklin, you don't need to worry about our family problems." "But I do worry," he said firmly. "Those boys changed my life. They gave me hope when I had none. And I'll be damned if I let some opportunist take advantage of their kindness." Sarah felt tears starting. In all the legal chaos, she had sometimes forgotten that this wasn't just about money or custody. It was about protecting the pure hearts that had created something beautiful. "What did you find?" she asked. "I have a friend, Eleanor's nephew, who works as a private investigator. We did some digging into David's activities since he left you." Sarah's pulse quickened. Sarah, he didn't inherit money from a relative. He's been running investment scams in Florida, small ones, targeting elderly people. He's facing potential criminal charges, but he's been staying ahead of the law by moving frequently. The words hit Sarah like lightning. Are you certain? Very certain. And there's more. He's already been in contact with 3 different media companies about selling exclusive rights to the boy's story. He's been representing himself as their manager and primary guardian. Sarah felt rage and relief flooding through her simultaneously. David wasn't just trying to insert himself into their lives. He was already trying to profit from their sons behind her back. Mr. Franklin, can your friend document all of this? Already done. We have a full report with copies of documents, financial records, everything your lawyer will need. That evening, Margaret Chen reviewed the evidence with barely contained excitement. Sarah, this changes everything. Not only can we block his custody request, but we can file for a restraining order. A man facing criminal fraud charges will not be granted joint custody of children with significant commercial interests. What does this mean for the boys? It means they can go back to being kids who happen to be brilliant inventors instead of pawns in their father's financial schemes. The next morning, Sarah gathered Ethan and Noah in their living room for a conversation she'd been dreading. "Boys, I need to tell you something about your father's visit," she explained, in terms they could understand, that David hadn't come back because he loved them, but because he wanted to control their money and success. "So he only came back because we're rich now?" Noah asked sadly. "I'm afraid so, baby." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Mum, we never cared about being rich. We just wanted to help Mr. Franklin." "I know. And now all these people are trying to use us," Noah added. "The TV people, the companies that want us to sell things, and now him." Sarah felt her heart breaking for their lost innocence. "Some people will try to use you because you're special, but that doesn't mean what you did wasn't wonderful. It just means we have to be careful about who we trust." "We trust you," Ethan said simply, "and Mr. Franklin, and Dr. Williams, and Mrs. Hayes." "That's enough," Noah agreed. "We don't need him." The custody hearing was cancelled when David's lawyer withdrew the petition after being presented with the fraud evidence. David himself disappeared from Michigan within 24 hours, apparently deciding that avoiding criminal charges was more important than pursuing his son's money. But the experience had changed something fundamental in their family. The boys were more cautious now, more aware that their success made them targets. Sarah was more protective, more suspicious of new opportunities and people who wanted to be involved in their lives. "Mom," Noah said as they sat in their garden that evening, "do you think we would have been happier if we had never invented the wheelchair?" It was a question that had been haunting Sarah too. "No, honey, because Mr. Franklin would still be lonely, and hundreds of other people wouldn't have the hope your invention gives them. What we need to learn is how to protect our good hearts while still helping people." "Like building a shield around our invention?" Ethan asked. "Exactly like that," Sarah smiled. "A shield that keeps out people who want to hurt us, but lets in people who want to help." As the sun set over their garden, Sarah realized they had survived their first real test. Their family was stronger now, more united, more aware of both the power and the responsibility that came with extraordinary success. But she also knew this wouldn't be their last challenge. Success, she was learning, was like a magnet. It attracted both wonderful opportunities and dangerous threats. The key was learning to tell the difference. 6 months after the custody crisis, life had settled into a new rhythm that balanced the boys' extraordinary capabilities with their need to simply be children. Sarah had hired a team she trusted. Margaret Chen continued as their lawyer. Dr. Williams remained their primary liaison at Ford. And most importantly, they had established the Franklin Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to funding mobility innovations. "Mrs. Mitchell, we have the production numbers from Ford," said James Morrison, their new business manager and former Ford executive who had taken early retirement to work exclusively with the family. The dual-seat wheelchair exceeded all sales projections. They've sold 47,000 units in the first 6 months. Sarah still felt disoriented by numbers like that. 47,000 families whose lives had been changed by her 7-year-old son's compassion. And the international orders? She asked. Overwhelming. Companies in Japan, Germany, and Sweden want to license production rights. We're looking at global distribution within the year. The boys were in their laboratory, the converted garage that had become their favorite workspace. Simpler and more comfortable than the corporate environment at Ford. They were working on their latest project, a mobility device for children with disabilities. "Mom, come see!" Noah called excitedly as she entered their workspace. They had created a prototype that looked more like a fun ride than medical equipment. Bright colors, built-in games, and a design that allowed disabled children to play alongside their able-bodied friends. "It's not just about getting around," Ethan explained seriously. "It's about not feeling different from other kids. Dr. Williams says if this works as well as our first invention, it could help millions of children worldwide," Noah added. Sarah felt the familiar swell of pride and protectiveness. Her sons hadn't lost their essential goodness despite everything they'd been through. If anything, their experience with David had made them more thoughtful about their motivations. "Boys, James has some news about the foundation." James joined them in the garage, carrying a folder full of applications. "We've received over 300 requests for funding," he said. "Inventors, researchers, and students, all working on assistive technologies. The foundation can fund about 30 projects this year." "How do we choose?" Ethan asked, looking overwhelmed by the responsibility. "We visit them," Noah said decisively. "We talk to them like Mr. Franklin talked to us. We find out who they want to help and why." Over the following weeks, they traveled to universities and research centers, meeting inventors whose passion reminded Sarah of her son's early excitement. They funded a college student developing brain-controlled prosthetics, a grandmother creating better communication devices for stroke patients, and a team of engineers working on affordable hearing aids for developing countries. "This is better than just making money," Noah said, after visiting a research lab where their funding was helping develop artificial limbs for children injured in accidents. "Money is just a tool," Ethan agreed. "What matters is what you build with it." Sarah watched her sons growing not just intellectually but emotionally, learning to handle success with wisdom beyond their years. But the real test came when MIT offered both boys full scholarships to attend their gifted youth program, starting immediately. They could begin university-level engineering courses next year, the MIT representative explained. "Their capabilities are extraordinary. This opportunity could accelerate their development exponentially." Sarah looked at her 8-year-old sons. When had they turned 8? And saw excitement warring with uncertainty in their eyes. "What do you boys think?" she asked. "It sounds amazing," Ethan said slowly. "But we don't want to leave Mr. Franklin," Noah finished, "or our foundation, or our projects here. And we don't want to leave you, Mom," Ethan added quietly. The MIT representative looked surprised. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is an unprecedented opportunity. Boys with their abilities could revolutionize multiple fields of engineering." "But they're still children," Sarah said firmly. "Children who value relationships and community over just intellectual achievement." That evening, as a family, they made a decision that would define their future. They would stay in Detroit, working with local universities and Ford, while maintaining their foundation and their connection to the community that had nurtured their first invention. "We can change the world from here," Noah said confidently. "And we can stay close to the people we care about," Ethan added. As Sarah tucked them into bed that night, she realized they had chosen something more valuable than prestige or accelerated education. They had chosen to remain grounded in the values that had made their success meaningful in the first place. "Mom," Noah said sleepily, "do you think we made the right choice?" "I think you made the choice that honors who you are," Sarah replied, "and that's always the right choice." Looking at her remarkable sons, Sarah knew they would indeed change the world, but they would do it as compassionate human beings first, and geniuses second, and that, she believed, would make all the difference. 2 years later, on a crisp October morning, Sarah stood before a gathering of 500 people in Detroit's Renaissance Center, preparing to tell the story that had transformed not just her family, but thousands of lives around the world. The boys, now 9 years old, sat in the front row next to Mr. Franklin, who had become their honorary grandfather and the foundation's first board member. They were flanked by Dr. Williams, Mrs. Hayes, and dozens of people whose lives had been touched by what started as two 7-year-olds wanting to help a lonely neighbor. 3 years ago, Sarah began, her voice steady with confidence she had earned through every challenge they had overcome. My sons taught me that the most powerful innovations come not from the desire for success, but from the simple wish to help someone who is hurting. She looked at Ethan and Noah, who were listening with the same intensity they brought to everything they cared about. Today, the Franklin Foundation has funded over 200 assistive technology projects. The dual-seat mobility chair has been sold in 38 countries. But more importantly, we've learned that true success isn't measured in money or recognition. It's measured in connections restored and isolation ended. In the audience, Sarah could see faces of people who had become part of their extended family. The college student whose brain-controlled prosthetics were now helping paralyzed patients worldwide. The grandmother whose communication devices were giving voice to thousands of stroke survivors. The engineer whose affordable hearing aids were transforming lives in remote villages. My sons are often asked what they want to invent next, Sarah continued. Their answer is always the same: whatever will help the most people. They've taught me that intelligence without compassion is just cleverness, but intelligence guided by love can literally change the world. Mr. Franklin wheeled forward to the microphone. Now 91 years old, but with eyes bright with purpose. I want to tell you about loneliness, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. 2 years and 8 months ago, I thought my life was over. I had lost my wife, my independence, and my hope. Then 2 little boys saw my isolation and decided it was a problem they could solve. He turned to look at Ethan and Noah. They didn't just give me mobility. They gave me purpose. Today I serve on the foundation board, I test new inventions, and I help other elderly people find ways to stay connected to the world. My life didn't end when Eleanor died. It transformed, thanks to 2 children who understood that the greatest disability is loneliness. The audience erupted in applause. But Sarah's attention was focused on her sons. Ethan was crying happy tears, the same tears she had cried so many times throughout this journey. Noah was holding Mr. Franklin's hand, their bond representing the bridge between generations that their invention had created. We want to say something, Noah said, approaching the microphone with Ethan. We've learned that being smart isn't about knowing everything, Ethan said. It's about caring enough to solve problems that matter. And we've learned that families aren't just people who share your blood, Noah added, looking at their chosen family in the audience. Families are people who help you become who you're supposed to be. Most importantly, they said together, we've learned that the best inventions come from love. As the formal presentation ended and people began to mingle, Sarah found herself in a quiet corner with her sons, watching the connections being made around them, inventors collaborating with users, investors meeting with researchers, and everywhere, people who had been brought together by the ripple effects of 2 children's compassion. Mom, Ethan said, do you remember when you used to worry about money all the time? Sarah laughed. I remember. Do you remember when your biggest worry was whether we could afford batteries for your projects? Now, our biggest worry is making sure we choose the right projects to fund, Noah said seriously. That's a good problem to have, Sarah replied. Dr. Williams approached with news that made Sarah's heart swell with pride. Sarah, Harvard wants to study the boys' innovation process to understand how to teach empathy-driven engineering to other students. What do you think, boys? Sarah asked. Can we help them teach other kids to invent things that help people? Noah asked. That's exactly what they want, Dr. Williams confirmed. Then yes, Ethan said decisively. If we can help create more inventors who care about helping people, that's almost as good as inventing things ourselves. As they walked to their car that evening, passing the news crews that still occasionally followed their story, Sarah reflected on the journey from that morning 3 years ago when she had worried about an electricity bill. They now lived in a world where money was no longer a concern, where opportunities were limitless, and where her son's ideas were changing lives on a global scale. But what mattered most was that Ethan and Noah were still the same boys who had seen a lonely man and decided to fix his isolation. "Mom," Noah said as they drove home, "do you think we'll keep inventing things forever?" "I think you'll keep caring about people forever," Sarah replied. "And as long as you do that, you'll find problems worth solving." "Good," Ethan said contentedly, "because there are still a lot of people who need help." As they pulled into the driveway of their home, still in Detroit, still close to Mr. Franklin and the community that had nurtured their first invention, Sarah realized that their greatest success wasn't the money or recognition they had gained. Their greatest success was that they had managed to grow and change and achieve extraordinary things while keeping their hearts intact. They had learned to navigate success without losing their compassion, to handle recognition without losing their humility, and to manage wealth without forgetting their values. Most importantly, they had learned that the purpose of success is to gain the power to help others succeed. And in that understanding, Sarah knew, lay the foundation for whatever extraordinary things her sons would create next.